Okay, I want you to just close your eyes for a second.
Yeah.
Imagine you were standing on a street corner in Toronto. It's the late 1940s.
Mm-hmm.
The war is over. The city is just booming, and there's this electric, almost frantic energy in the air.
Right.
You can hear streetcars rattling down the avenue, construction crews hammering away, maybe the sizzle of onions on a grill from a nearby diner. It's loud. It's industrial.
That's such a great image. And you're right. That soundscape, that noise, is really the backdrop for the story we're digging into today.
Yeah.
We often think of history in terms of, dates and treaties, quiet rooms. But the soundtrack of a generation, that tells you so much more about the actual human experience.
Exactly. And today we are unpacking the life of the man who, you could argue, conducted that soundtrack for an entire community. We're doing a deep dive into the life of Vasil Patsko.
A name maybe not everyone knows.
Not everyone know, but if you haven't heard the name, don't worry. By the end of this, you're going to wish you could have seen him play live, because this isn't just a story about a musician, it's a story about a double life.
That is the perfect way to frame it. Vasil Patsko is such a fascinating figure because he really is a cornerstone of the Macedonian Canadian social fabric in the mid-20th century.
Right.
He wasn't just some guy playing tunes. He was a cultural anchor.
Right.
But that double life thing you mentioned is what makes his story so impressive.
And this is where it gets really interesting for me. If you met Vasil during the day, you wouldn't see a maestro in a tuxedo. You'd see a guy in a stained apron flipping burgers at a diner on St. Clair Avenue.
The classic immigrant dichotomy.
It is. It's like Superman, but instead of a cape, he's got a clarinet case stashed in the back office. So our mission today is to understand how this one man managed to lead one of the most famous ethnic orchestras in North America by night while running a grueling kitchen by day.
And more importantly, I think, we need to look at how that day job, that hustle, wasn't just a distraction. It was the fuel. It's a story about how the grill actually powered the music.
I love that. The grill powered the music. Okay, so let's rewind. Where does this all start? Who was Vasil Patsko before he was the king of St. Clair Avenue?
Well, his story begins in a village called Zhelevo in Macedonia. He was born there in 1907. And from what we can tell, he was immersed in a musical household from the very beginning.
So it was in the family.
It was in the family DNA. It wasn't just a hobby.
And back then, in those villages, you didn't exactly go to a conservatory, right? You weren't reading sheet music.
Precisely. Like a lot of the great village musicians of that era, Vasil played primarily by ear. And I want to pause on that because people often undervalue what playing by ear really means.
It's a skill.
It's a specific kind of genius. It requires this deep, active listening. You have to hear a complex melody once, deconstruct it in your head, and then just replicate it.
It allows for so much more improvisation, I bet.
Exactly. But, and this is a key detail I found, he wasn't only self-taught. He actually had a stint where things got very rigid, very fast.
We're talking about his time in the Greek army.
I am. Talk about a culture clash. Right.
It's fascinating. While serving, he received formal musical training. So you have this incredible blend of raw, intuitive folk tradition, the stuff that hits you in the gut.
Yeah.
And then you combine it with the discipline, the breath control, the technical structure of a military band. That combination is lethal for a musician.
Structure and soul.
At the
same time.
And he wasn't just a one-trick pony either. The sources list his toolkit, and it's extensive.
No, he was a true multi-instrumentalist. His main voice was the clarinet. That's where he was a virtuoso. But he was also proficient on the violin, the saxophone, and the trumpet.
He could basically be a one-man band if he had to.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And that versatility, it just speaks to a deep understanding of how music is built, not just how to play one part.
Okay, so you have this incredibly talented young guy in Europe, but obviously the story moves to Canada. How did that happen? It wasn't easy to just move across the world in the 1930s.
No, and it's a classic, often harrowing migration story.
Yeah.
It didn't happen all at once. His father, Dun Patsko, was the trailblazer. The sources say he made several trips back and forth, sort of testing the waters, earning money, laying the groundwork. The family finally settled permanently in Toronto in 1937.
And the timing there is, it's everything. When you look at the dates, it makes you realize how fragile this all is.
It really sends a chill down your spine. Vasil's wife, Sophia, and their 3 daughters arrived in 1939.
Just before the door slammed shut with World War II.
Exactly. A few months later, a paperwork delay. And this story might have ended very differently. But they made it. They were in Toronto.
So they're safe. But they also have to eat. And this brings us to the day job. I think we romanticize artists, but Vasil had a family to feed in a new country.
Enter Paul's Lunch.
Paul's Lunch. It sounds so quintessentially mid-century, doesn't it? Tell us about this place.
It was a family-owned restaurant right at the intersection of St. Clair Avenue West and Dufferin Street.
Yeah.
And for anyone who knows Toronto history, that location is significant. This area was becoming a major ethnic enclave. Macedonian immigrants were buying property, setting up shops. It was the heartbeat of that diaspora.
So it was right in the thick of things, a hub.
A hub. But let's be clear about the work. It was a grind. From 1937 to 1956, that's nearly 20 years, Vasil worked the counter and the kitchen.
20 years. I've worked food service, and I know how exhausting that is. The heat, the grease, the rush hours.
And this wasn't a solo operation. It was a true family enterprise. It was Vasil, his father Dunn, and his brothers, all in it together.
And this is where we connect the dots back to the music, right? Because usually we think of the job as the thing that takes you away from your passion.
Right, the starving artist narrative.
Yeah. I could have been a rock star, but I had to work at the bank. But you're saying it was different here.
The sources are really clear on this. Paul's Lunch was the engine. It was the economic backbone. The profits from those burgers, the tips from the coffees, that money funded the instruments. It funded the travel expenses. It kept the orchestra on the road.
That is so cool. It's small-scale entrepreneurship fueling cultural preservation. He's flipping burgers so the clarinet can keep playing.
And not just playing in the basement. Because of Paul's Lunch, Vasil could launch Vasil Patsko and his Macedonian orchestra. And this wasn't some little hobby band.
No, let's talk about the band. Because when the apron came off, this guy transformed. They were the go-to group, weren't they?
Absolutely. If you were part of that community in the 40s or 50s, Vasil Patsko was the soundtrack to your life's biggest moments. Weddings, engagements, church picnics.
The moments that define a family. And the famous Selski dances.
Yes, the village dances. These were massive social events. You have to remember there was no social media. These dances were the social network.
And the Patsko Orchestra was the server hosting that network.
That's a great way to put it. But what really strikes me is their geographic reach.
Oh.
I mean, I assume they were just a Toronto thing.
Me too. But they were road warriors.
Incredibly prolific.
Yeah.
All over southern Ontario, Hamilton, Windsor, London. But then they crossed the border regularly. They went deep into the American industrial hubs. Detroit, Buffalo, Akron, Ohio.
All the way to Gary, Indiana.
All the way to Gary, Indiana.
That's a serious haul, especially back then on those roads. They were touring the Rust Belt.
Well, it makes sense if you think about where the communities were settling. They went where the factory jobs were.
Right.
And wherever those communities sprang up, they eventually needed music. They needed a tie to the old country to feel human again. Vasil provided that.
And he didn't do it alone. He had a serious crew with him. It sounds like a supergroup of that scene.
It really was. You had his brother, Louis Patsko, on drums, keeping it in the family.
Which makes for a tight sound.
Always. Then you had Ilya Butsev on violin and piano, Jimmy Tomev on trumpet, Eddie Fedosinski on accordion, and Johnny Nichols on clarinet.
Wow, that's a full sound. Drums, violin, piano, trumpet, accordion, 2 clarinets. That room must have been absolutely shaking.
It was a wall of sound. And the interplay between the accordion and the clarinet alone, that creates this really dense rhythmic texture that just demands you get up and dance.
So, okay, they were popular, they were hardworking, but let's dig a bit deeper into the content. Why does the expert in you find their set list so important? What specific songs were they playing?
This is a crucial point, and it's where we get into the ethnomusicology of it all. They weren't just playing generic folk music. They were preserving specific regional sounds.
Okay.
The sources highlight the regions of Koster, Lorraine, and Prespa.
And for those of us who aren't experts in Balkan geography, why does that distinction matter?
Because distinct regions have distinct dialects, rhythms, lyrical themes. It's like the difference between Delta blues and Chicago blues.
Got it.
For an immigrant living in the Junction in Toronto, hearing a song specifically from the Koster region wasn't just entertainment, it was an identity marker. It was a way of saying, I am still who I was.
It's validation. And they actually laid this down on wax, right? They made records.
They did. In the late 1940s, they recorded 2 albums of old country music.
At the House of Hamburg, that's a legendary spot in Toronto history.
Correct. And those recordings are so historically significant because they captured that specific era of the diaspora. They featured vocalists like Turpo Stefov and Sofia Denef. It solidified their legacy.
Once you record it, it lasts. It becomes an archive.
That's it.
Now, here is something that really caught my eye. We keep talking about them serving the Macedonian community, but their music actually crossed some surprising boundaries.
This is one of my favorite details in the whole story. In 1947, Vasil's music was featured on Jewish radio programs in Toronto.
That is wild to me. Why would a Macedonian folk orchestra be on Jewish radio?
Well, it speaks to the universality of the musical language they were using. If you look at the scales, the minor keys, the emotional resonance of the clarinet, there's a lot of crossover with Jewish klezmer music.
Ah, okay.
There's a shared sorrow and joy in those sounds. It shows that good music,
Yes.
it ignores borders.
And he wasn't just sticking to the folk circuit either. He performed alongside some pretty big names.
Yes, he occasionally performed with big band leaders like Bert Niosi.
Who is known as Canada's King of Swing.
That's not a title they just hand out.
No. So the fact that Vasil Patsko, the burger flipper from St. Clair, could hang with the King of Swing shows you the level of musicianship we are dealing with here.
And wasn't just a folk musician in a patronizing sense. He was a professional quality virtuoso who commanded respect from the entire musical community.
That really cements the idea that this was one of the first truly professional Macedonian ensembles in North America. They set the bar.
They really did. They elevated the standard. They gave the culture a sense of dignity on a big stage.
Sadly, the music has to stop eventually. Vasil passed away in 1974. But when you look at the legacy, it's huge.
It is. The sounds of Koster, Lirin, and Prespa, they didn't die with him because he played them, because he recorded them, because he traveled to all those cities. He was a bridge between the old world and the new.
And what happened to Paul's Lunch?
The engine? Paul's Lunch closed its doors in 1956. But its legacy is completely tied to the music. You can't separate the restaurant from the orchestra.
Which brings us back to that central idea, the grill and the stage.
It's the perfect metaphor.
Yeah.
You do the hard, sometimes invisible labor, the cooking, the cleaning, so that you can sustain the thing that makes you you, the art, the joy.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? If you walked into Paul's Lunch in 1950 and ordered a coffee from Vasil, you'd just see a guy in a stained apron.
You have no idea.
No idea that the same hands pouring your coffee were going to be playing a blistering clarinet solo in Detroit that weekend.
It really forces you to reevaluate the people you interact with every day, doesn't it?
That's the thought I want to leave you with today. We interact with service workers constantly. The person making your sandwich, driving your cab. We see the day job, but what's their night job? What culture are they preserving? What art are they funding with the shift they're working right now?
It's a humbling thought. We're often being served by people who are heroes in a story we just don't know yet.
Vasil Patsko was one of those heroes, a virtuoso disguised as a cook, keeping the soul of a village alive, one burger and one song at a time.
A true cornerstone.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a fascinating look at how culture actually survives, not in museums, but through hard work and passion.
It was a pleasure. It's a story worth telling.
We'll catch you on the next one. Keep listening and keep digging deeper.